for me, when I think about my identity, and it's something that I probably never realised throughout the majority of my life, but certainly there were things that happened to me when I was a child that always made me feel like I was the odd one out. So, for example, my father left when I was very small, so I was 3 weeks old. And I was the only child of a single parent family, which now in today's day and age is totally normal, and you've got these incredibly diverse families. But back in the 80s when I was a kid, it was like seen as something a little bit unusual. Okay, so Laura, we're sat here today and it's episode 1 of my podcast, All Things Identity. So I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be my interviewer today. I'm going to be my own first guest with you interviewing me. And what I thought we could talk about today is a little bit about my personal identity coaching, but mainly really talking about the purpose of the podcast and exactly what I want to get across with All Things Identity. And seeing as I'm my own first guest, I wanted to actually share my own story as well in terms of the things that I've gone through surrounding my identity and I guess how I've come through that, basically.
Well, Karina, I'm so happy that you asked me to do this. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm so excited about the podcast. It just sounds fantastic. And I can't wait to see what you do with this. But let's start with the personal identity coach. What exactly is that? What is it all about?
Yeah. So personal identity coaching really is working with individuals who, for some reason, feel like they've lost their sense of identity. So I think most commonly people experience some kind of significant change and they come through the other side and they just think, oh my gosh, who am I? Like I just don't know who I am anymore. So the personal identity coaching really has been set up to help people to rediscover and re-identify what do they look like at the very core. Who is their core persona? And I had my own journey. I've got my own personal story, which I'll come on to later, but I had my own journey in terms of how I kind of came to this point through my own career. So I come from a corporate background, as you know, and I worked in the talent space. Well, I worked in sales first of all, but then I worked in talent. And I worked in the corporate space for, longer than I care to admit, so probably about 15 years. And all throughout that period, I was involved in working with people and I was involved in coaching. And then I decided that I wanted to take a little bit of a career change. And I'd always wanted to set up my own business. I never really knew exactly what that was going to be. And then I went through a life purpose coaching course, which I'm now trained to be as well. So I'm a life purpose coach through the identity piece. And it led me to exploring different passions that I'd had as a child that were kind of almost untapped, or, you know, certain things in life take you down a different avenue and you no longer explore those for whatever reason. And mine was always fashion and styling. So that led me to retraining to become a stylist. And then I actually went through, again, another journey where I was working with people as a stylist, and a lot of people would come to me and they would have their own kind of, I don't know, their own issues with their own identity. They'd gone through some kind of change. And so this is what started to point me in the avenue of, shall I set up my own coaching business? And is there actually a bigger piece here around the whole topic of identity?
Yeah, it's really interesting that your background, Karina, because with the fashion, with the styling, I guess that, because when you're styling somebody, you're talking to them and you're getting a kind of a sense of their personality, aren't you?
Yeah.
And it is often someone that's a bit maybe lost the right word. They don't know how to dress, they don't know how to, and so I can understand why this has led you to this. And of course with the life purpose, you know, so you've got all the skills to do this fantastically, and I think it's a brilliant thing that you're doing. And also the change, like you said about people going through life changes. Well, I do not know one single human being on this planet that has not gone through a significant life change at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And I think these changes are ongoing.
Yeah.
You know, you can go through a life-changing event and then like you said, it's how do you come through that? How do you come out the other side?
Yeah.
Then once you've come through the other side, however way it's happened, you're going to go through your life and have another life change at some point, whatever that might be. Like it could be work, it could be your relationships, it could be friendship, it could be absolutely anything at all. So I think this is absolutely brilliant what you're doing. And I think everybody can relate to this, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter how old you are. I think every single person is going to take something out of this and out of this chat today as well. But talk us through the podcast, Karina. How did this come about and what is the purpose of the podcast?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, people are going to go through different changes all the time, and a lot of the work that I do with my clients, someone will have gone through some kind of change, and first and foremost, I work with them to rediscover themselves and to find out their core identity, so that then they can carry these skills forwards as well. And if there's different things like the styling piece, or they want to explore like setting up a business and figuring out their life purpose, and it all leads on to that, and we all have to live in alignment with our core identity. And I guess coming onto the podcast, so what I really wanted to do with All Things Identity is to be able to showcase people who've gone through exactly that. So I think, and again, I've got my own scenarios as well where you're absolutely right. We go through all of these changes, and sometimes we go through changes that are controlled. So these are big, big life changes that we put ourselves in these circumstances. Sometimes things happen to us and it's out of our control. We didn't expect something to happen, but we still have to navigate it either way. And you could be male, you could be female. It could be something that's a really positive change that you're experiencing. So, motherhood, for example, is such an amazing and incredible thing, but still people have their challenges. People realize that they've kind of adopted this new identity as a mum. They go through body changes, and so we have to learn to love ourselves once again in our kind of evolved sense of identity. So yeah, the podcast really is to show a really broad range of individuals who've had their own stories, they've had their own situations, and how did they work through these situations? What does that mean to them now? And also, what have they taken away from that? Because when we go through these changes in life, we learn new skills, we adapt and we evolve, and we become slightly different versions of ourselves. But actually, we take away these incredible resources as well, which I don't think that we give ourselves enough credit for. So yeah, so that's the overall purpose of the podcast.
I think it's really interesting, actually, like you said about the control, things you can control, things you can't control. And, maybe some life changes do initially look like it's a great thing. But then again, like things are changing all the time, aren't they? So then you could have another change that you think, oh, actually, I need to kind of adapt to this, something that I thought was going to happen with this change. It's actually not changed in the way that I thought it would do. So I guess this is where this coaching comes in. It's about getting through it, isn't it, and coming out the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, as we said, you are going to go through different life changes all the time. You go through one change and it's not a case of, okay, we deal with this and then we come through. Yes, you do, but then something else might happen to you, several years down the line. And yeah, the whole controlled, not controlled piece. So you can choose to do something that you think is going to positively impact your life. And maybe it will positively impact your life in the long run, but it doesn't stop it from being uncomfortable whilst it's happening. So, you could choose to take a step up into a leadership role. You're doing that because it's something that you want to do. But it doesn't mean that there's not going to be this period of time that's going to be really uncomfortable, because for you, it's not the natural, it's not the norm. So it's a great thing, but it's learning to adapt to that and think, okay, what is my identity in this sphere? What is my identity now, but so that it's still aligned to my core identity, it's still aligned to my values, my interests and my passions, but I'm just stepping into this slightly different role, basically.
And I like the way you said core identity, because at the end of the day, that is what life is about, really, isn't it? It's about being true to yourself, being true to that core identity, and then finding that throughout the challenging changing times throughout your life. And I know that you want to tell us a little bit about your changes that you've been through, Karina, because this is what's made you want to do this, the personal identity coaching, and of course set up the podcast as well. So tell us about, first of all, because we spoke about this off camera, off mic before, about childhood, because that's where it really starts, isn't it?
Yeah. I think so it's interesting. So if I think about, so first and foremost, I think, your belief system is set up from basically things that happen to you up to the age of about 7 years old. So once you reach 7 years old, pretty much your entire belief system is already set up, basically, which is it's quite an incredible thing to think that everything that happens to you through that time, up until the point of 7, which is really, really young, has that level of impact and has that level of influence over you. For me, when I think about my identity, and it's something that I probably never realised throughout the majority of my life, but certainly there were things that happened to me when I was a child that always made me feel like I was the odd one out. So, for example, my father left when I was very small, so I was 3 weeks old. And I was the only child of a single parent family, which now in today's day and age is totally normal, and you've got these incredibly diverse families. But back in the 80s when I was a kid, it was like seen as something a little bit unusual. And so I guess for me, like, that was the most shaping thing around my identity. It was the fact that I was this kind of odd kid. And I always felt like I was an odd kid because there weren't really that many other, everyone had a brother or sister and everyone had 2 parents. It wasn't until I reached teens that started to change a little bit. But yeah, so I always felt like a bit of an unusual kid. And I can see now when I look back how that's played its role in my behaviours later on in life as well, because I've always had this kind of overwhelming need to be liked. Like, I've always wanted to be liked by everybody. And like, if I thought that someone disliked me or wasn't even keen on me, then it would have been absolutely like crushing. That would have been the worst thing in the world. And I can see now that it would be completely linked back to that, in the sense that because I felt like I was this odd kid, I then had to go out into the world and, feel like people were going to like me and I wasn't going to be that unusual person anymore, which later I've realised is more of a superpower than anything else, So
I was just going to say that. What's that quote where it's like about not you don't want to be fitting in, you want to be standing out.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't want to follow the crowd.
That's it. Yeah. You don't. But I guess, like you said, as a child, you didn't feel that. Now, as an adult, as you've processed, like, actually, I'm actually quite happy with my unique style, with my unique, the way I am. Yeah. But I do know what you mean with that. And, things like, and I know a lot of people are going to relate to this, things like moving over, relocating over here now to Dubai. When did you move? So you were in the UK at first, weren't you?
Yeah, so I moved at the beginning of 2016. So I moved from London, and I'd always lived in London all throughout my adulthood. So for me, it was quite a significant change. I hadn't ever relocated overseas as well. I'd often talked about it. I'd often thought about it and always wanted to do it. But this was the first time that I'd lived overseas. So yeah, it was quite a big move for me at the time.
It is. And I think people, with you in Dubai, we're living this fancy lifestyle. We've got the sun, we've got the beach every day, and we are truly blessed to be here. Like, we are. It's an amazing lifestyle. For sure. But I don't think I think that's what people see.
Yes.
The sun, the glam, the glitz. Yeah. But there are many reasons that people do relocate. I mean, a lot of the time, people have got a new job here, but it's not like you're thinking, oh, I've got a new job. Okay, I'll start. That's a big enough change in itself, moving jobs. But when you're moving for a job, or you're moving for whatever reason to another country, that is a massive, massive step, isn't it? Yeah. And, okay, I've got a great new job, but what are you leaving? Are you leaving family? Are you leaving friends? So that's a big change, which a heck of a lot of people have gone through in Dubai, because there's a lot of expats here. What was the reason for you? Did you just want to change of job? Were you just ready to start a new life, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's so this is where I think my real kind of, what's the word, awakening around the topic of who you are and your identity really started. Because when I relocated, yes, I relocated because I wanted to do something new, and I'd always wanted to live overseas, and I love Dubai. I'd been here quite a few times. I've been here for business. I'd been here for, holidays and things like that, and I absolutely loved it. But actually, the year leading up to my relocation, I suffered quite a number of big changes. So I split up with my long-term partner at the time, who I later came on to divorce. And I also went through a major redundancy as well, literally about a few weeks before I relocated. So I used to work for a big corporate, and I'd worked there for a number of years. And I really thought that was my sort of career nailed down. It was a company that I could change jobs with and stuff like that. And then I got made redundant from that one position, and I'd also split up with my partner earlier in the year. And I decided that, do you know what, maybe all avenues are pointing me to do this thing. I've always been talking about relocating, so why not just do it? So yeah, I packed my bags, and I can remember getting on the fly, and I had I think 3 suitcases, and that was it. I just turned up in Dubai and got on with it. Didn't have a job, just yeah.
So did you know anybody in Dubai?
Yeah, I did. So I knew one person. So I had one friend, but yeah, I didn't have a network or anything like that. So it was, yeah.
See, that is a lot, Karina.
Yeah.
That's a lot to deal with, I think. And the fact that you didn't even have the job to come to, that was a really brave move. I think you've got to, first of all, give yourself credit for that as well, and to look back and see how far you've come. But this is why I think you are the perfect person to be doing this as this personal identity coach, because I guess you moved here and you thought, right, hang on a minute, I've got to process my relationship not being there anymore, the fact that I lost the job. And I think those two are massive life-changing events, like you said. When somebody gets made redundant, that can really set a person back. And then to go through that and the divorce at the same time, and then relocate, how did you start then when you moved here? I guess you just processed it all, like you said, and this is what you are now helping others to do, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I think now when I look back, it's nice that you say give yourself credit for it, because now when I look back, I think, my gosh, what was I thinking? But I guess because, and this is so going back to what we were talking about earlier, controlled versus uncontrolled, I felt very in control of my life at that time, bizarrely, even though everything was kind of up in the air and it was a bit crazy. But I had chosen to, so my partner and I had split up, and really it was instigated by me. So I felt like I was in control of that. And then when I was made redundant, even though it wasn't my choice to have that particular role made redundant, I could have stayed with the organisation and looked for another job in my home country. But I chose not to. So again, do you see, everything felt like I was in control. And then I landed here, and what you're lacking is having that support network around you, having that stability, having the things that you understand. You're in a completely different country, and just everything, what it's like when you move here. You don't know how to set up Diwa and Ajaris, and so everything is a bit of a learning curve. And yeah, it was completely the most hands down unsettling experience. And it would later turn out to be one of the best things I've ever done with my life. But for those first 12 months, no lie, it was incredibly difficult. And I think, that's when I realized that I didn't really know who I was, having come through all of those changes. I hadn't expected to be single at that age, and I was doing that and in a brand new country. And something else as well that around my identity in London, like I was always this kind of a career girl, and that was something that was a really big part of my identity as well. And then I'd gone through the redundancy, which no matter how I dressed it up, actually did really impact my confidence. And then I came here and I did get another corporate job, which I'm so grateful for, but it wasn't the same kind of role, and it wasn't anything like what I'd really been doing back home. And so again, a massive part of my identity had completely shifted. So all these things sort of hit me all at once, really.
And I think that the things that you've gone through, Karina, I think a lot of people, and more people, I think, than we realise, that they move over to the UAE, to Dubai. And yes, like I said before, it's the great lifestyle, which it is. And, you know, the money, tax-free, all that, and that's it's attractive. But a lot of people will say, I know that people will relate with this, and I know you will, but people often say to you, what were you running away from when you moved over to Dubai?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I came for a job.
Yeah.
But then actually the amount of people that I've spoken to, myself, I moved over for a job, but I'd also come out of a long-term relationship. So a little part of me thought, I've got a new job, but I'm also escaping because I don't have to, you know, well, you do have to deal with it, but you're leaving that behind. And so many people have said to me recently that they had come out of relationships, so they moved over here because it's the new life, but it's not as it always appears. Like we know on the social media, here I am now, look at me, I'm living my best life, which we are 90% of the time, but like all the different things that we all go through. And this is why I think the personal identity coaching is fantastic that you're doing, but also this podcast is going to be, you know, when which we'll go on to in a minute, the different episodes that you've got lined up, I think people are going to think, oh, it's not just me then. Yeah. I'm feeling like that. I'm feeling like I can relate to Karina because I moved over here and I left a relationship, I had a divorce or whatever, and I was on my own. Yeah. But this is what this is about as well. Like we said, it's coming through the other side. And how do you come through the other side?
Yeah. It's interesting with the relocation for sure, because I see that running away thing. I used to get that all the time in my first year. You know, what are you running away from? Like it was some kind of like almost like an accusation, you know, like what are you running away from? And I did it for the whole transformation experience. And there had been certain things that had happened, but I think, you know, when we change something, it's always triggered by an event in our lives. So that's why the majority of people will have experienced some kind of change. And then they think, do you know what? I've always wanted to do this thing. There's an opportunity that's come along. So why not just do it? I think in terms of dealing with that, and I wrote a piece on this recently, actually, and a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody and I said, please just separate the two things, you know, because if you've moved overseas, then you're dealing with that fantastic, incredible opportunity, and you need to live every single moment enjoying that and feeling appreciative of that. And yes, you know, there is this other thing as well that you've gone through, which is not so positive. It is more challenging. And that's the part that you need to process, but don't fuse the two together. Because I think in my experience, that's where I went wrong. And this was my learning curve, was the fact that I kind of allowed that to bring the two things together. And then I started to go, oh my gosh, maybe I am running away from something. And I wasn't. Like, I could have dealt with that situation back in the UK, and I largely had dealt with some of that situation back in the UK. But I think as soon as someone asks you that question, it starts to make you turn inward and question yourself. But I think if you have a true, it's like with anything, if you know yourself at the very, very core, you have a true understanding of your values, why you've chosen to do something, then you don't start questioning yourself. You don't allow somebody else's opinion to have that impact on you. You can say quite confidently, no, there's two different things going on here. This wasn't very nice. I'm dealing with this, but separately, I've chosen to relocate, and what an incredible opportunity it is to be doing that.
And I think it takes a certain kind of person to relocate as well. I don't think everybody can do it. And I think people often forget that, you know, we're all here in Dubai, whatever career, whatever industry we're in, we're all working hard to get, you know, to do whatever we do. But I'm sure now, if you looked back, if you think of the people that you know in the UK, and especially after what you'd gone through, the redundancy, the divorce, how many of those people do you think would have actually had the courage to relocate? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of my friends back home as well have said to me, oh my gosh, you know, I can't believe that you're relocating, like at that time. And I think people were surprised and people were not surprised, because I think I always do, like, I don't know, like bold things, I guess is the right way of putting it. So I guess people were surprised that I was doing it, but probably not surprised that I was doing it, if that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, look, even when I look back at my own action as well, like what I just said to you, right? I was like, I look back and I think, what on earth was I thinking to move overseas so quickly, with having, you know, dealing with all of that, or having dealt with all of that very recently. So yeah, I think you're right. I think some people though, when I think of my friends, they would never relocate overseas anyway, because they're just happy being back at home, you know?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, but I think it's what you're doing now, especially for people in Dubai, in the UAE. This coaching, is, and I just want to touch on this again, Karina, as well. Like, I know that you're a woman, strong woman, and there's going to be lots of women watching this and listening to the podcasts. But this affects men as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be great for men. Like, men can have this kind of coaching.
Yeah.
Because I know it's often that men don't like to talk about their emotions, or don't like to, you know, admit that they're going through this. But so many men, expat men that have moved over from whichever country they've moved from, they might be thinking, actually, this is actually really interesting. Maybe I could do with a bit of this kind of coaching, because just to find my core self again after the life challenge that I've been through, or the life change that I've been through. So I definitely think it appeals to both men and women. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, men go through their own challenges, and so some will be different, obviously. But at the end of the day, this is applicable. This is totally applicable to anybody, irrespective of gender, because first and foremost, you need to understand who you are at the very core. What does your personal identity look like before you even start thinking about overlaying that with the different roles that we carry out in life? Because that's what it boils down to. You know, we carry out these different roles, you know, whether we run our own businesses, whether we, you know, have these big roles in the corporate space, how we choose to project ourselves through our style and image, that's another reflection of our identity. But everything that I've just listed would apply to both genders. Obviously, you come on to things like motherhood and stuff like that, which is more female related. But yeah, I mean, men certainly go through their own journey with different experiences as well. So absolutely.
And I think, you know, people now watching this might think, do you know what, I'm going to book to have a chat with Karina, because this could do me good, which I think it would do anybody good, anybody. Just sitting down, just with somebody, asking you a simple question of like, who are you?
Yeah.
Who is the core? What is the core of you? And once you get to that and you talk about it, but I think it's really interesting as well. This is why I think you're fantastic for this coaching, because you have done the life purpose coaching, but the styling, Karina, I think that's so important. And I think, like, you always look fantastic. I mean, how many times do I always say to you, oh, I love this outfit on your Instagram, whatever. But that changes the way you are.
Yeah.
What you're wearing changes you, doesn't it? And just for somebody saying, I mean, I remember once I was talking to a stylist years ago, and they just said to me, oh, this is what you're wearing doesn't suit your figure. Try this kind of outfit. And I was like, oh gosh, I would never have thought about that. Ever. And that's just, I thought, okay, and I just kept that with me now.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm saying, like with if somebody comes to you for the coaching, they're getting everything.
Yeah.
In one, really, like all your experience, all you've been through, the styling, the life purpose coaching. I just think it's fantastic what you're doing. I think it's brilliant.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anybody else here in Dubai, in the UAE, that's doing anything like this.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. And just going back to that journey of how I came about the personal identity coaching, it was actually, first of all, I was sort of looking at building out style coaching. And then I realized that people, and you're absolutely right, aesthetics is a really big part of styling, right? So, you have to understand the things that suit you aesthetically. But actually, so many of the people that I was working with didn't really understand what they liked. So I would say, what are the things that naturally you would draw, like your eye would get drawn to? What kind of styles do you like? Who are your style icons? Who's your inspiration? And people would say, oh, I just don't know, because it's almost like a part of themselves, their identity that they'd abandoned when they decided that they were no longer stylish. So it's kind of coming back to that. And that's when I realized that, again, that is really drawing you back to your own identity. Who is your identity at the very center? When you start to understand that, then you can start to be more bold in your exploration. And it's so applicable with any part of your life as well.
Yeah, I think it's really, truly fantastic what you're doing, Karina. It really is. And I think even just listening to your story now, I mean, this is only episode 1. I mean, podcast is going to be absolutely fantastic. But listening to your story, and, I think sometimes, when you have these coaches and, okay, I'm going to be a coach, I'm going to be a fashion stylist, I'm going to do this. But that's why I think it's so interesting, and it's such a good idea that you've told your story, because you are the right person to be doing this coaching. Do you know what I mean? You've been through all the life changes, you've done all the styling, you've done the life purpose coaching. Now you're wanting to show others that you can come through the other side, and it can be a positive life change, even though you're thinking, oh gosh, I think what's that, the quote where it says you can't look at your life when you look forward, you can't see like what's going to happen, but when you look back, you can't join the dots looking forward. You can only join the dots when you look back and see where you've come from and why and how things have happened. But at the end of the day, everything is about your core self and how you deal with these life-changing events that we all go through. Every single person goes through them. Yeah. And now this is episode 1. Yes. What is the rest of what's your aim, your goal for this podcast now going forward?
My goal really is to showcase as many stories as I can, and as diverse in nature, really, in terms of, what have people gone through, some of the, positive changes that people have gone through, but they've still sat there and thought, oh, I don't know who I am, or I don't know how this has impacted me. What journey have they been on? And, obviously there's more challenging stories as well. And so it's really showcasing men, women, different genders going through these different things, and how did they come through the other side? Because I think something that we spoke about earlier is, people are going through things all the time, and sometimes we don't realise it as well. You might be sat next to somebody at work or something like that who's going through their own struggles. They might be going through a divorce and they haven't shared it. Why would they, openly at work? And so it's to give people that level of hope that we all go through these things. And it's not easy by any stretch, but there's a process that we can follow, and we can come through the other side, and we come through as these evolved human beings and we learn things about ourselves that we didn't even know, certain skills that we had, certain resources that we had. So it's really about showing those kind of stories and giving people a bit of hope and inspiration, I guess.
I love the word hope, because there is always hope, isn't there? And I just love this concept. I think this podcast is going to be huge because everybody can relate to it, especially living here in Dubai, especially if you're an expat as well, because it's very different to being in your home country, isn't it? And like you said, it's looking on, seeing how people have come through those life-changing events, and through the coaching, it's only going to help. It can't do anything other than help, which I think once you get to your core self. And I think, you telling your story today has just been a fantastic start to the podcast, Karina, honestly.
Thank you.
And I know I said it before, you have to give yourself credit for what you've done. Someone looking at you thinking, there could be somebody watching now or listening now thinking, oh, I've gone through a divorce, I've lost my job, I don't have any money, whatever it might be. Yeah. But listening to your story, I think will help so many people think, do you know what, I can do this and I can come through the other side, especially if I get my identity. I know who I am. I'm strong in who I am. I'm confident in who I am. Look at what I can do and look at what you've achieved, Karina. So well done on that.
Thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's everything is a journey. You know, what you said earlier, you look back on life and you can start to, you know, join up the dots and realize that, you know, all of these things have led you to a certain point.
Yes.
You know, I can now look back at all of my experiences, be it personal or career related, the different studies that I undertook through coaching, through then becoming a stylist. It's all led me to here now. And I know that, you know, someone listening might be going through their own personal situation, crisis, and thinking, well, I can't possibly figure out how that would benefit me. But there will be a point where you come to the end of that and you look back and you think, yeah, it was horrible and it wasn't easy, but there's something that I have as a result of that. Is it a learning? Is it a skill? Is it that it actually created some unknown opportunity? So yeah, that's the whole purpose, and that's the message, really.
I think it's such a brilliant message. And I just have to say this, Karina, before we finish, what I love about you coming on and telling your story, I mean, you could have thought to yourself, right, I'm going to set up a podcast, I'm going to talk about my business, all things identity. Here we go. I've got my first guest on, which would have been fantastic. You know, everybody would love that. So it's a great idea, great concept. But the fact that you are here telling your story, what has happened to you, life isn't always as it appears on, as we know, on the social media. You know, you look at your Instagram, like I said, I'm always commenting on your outfits and, oh, Karina, she's a glamorous fashion stylist. Now she's this coach. She's amazing, Dubai, which it is. But it's just so nice to hear what you've gone through and that you've openly spoken about that and the life changes and how you've got to where you are now. Yeah. So thank you for doing that as well. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. I think you have to set the scene, right, if I'm going to ask people to come on. So, yeah, it's important to do that. But thank you for interviewing me.
No, thank you, Karina. It's been great. It's been great chatting to you. And I'm very excited to see what's going to happen with this podcast. So good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. And, yeah, we've got a few interesting guests lined up. So, watch this space.